حي على الفلاح.
As narrated by Abu Huraira, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said every Muslim, or should I say every person, is born according to their true nature in Islam, and after their fathers change them to either different religions, or Shaytan changes them through the influence of their fathers to cause them to leave their true nature. As I reflect on this, I think of a picture in my photo album where I was leaning on a sofa and stretching my legs out as far as I could to put them on the table. I didn't notice that I was actually just trying to put my feet on the table, nor did I notice why I wanted to do that. As my mother told me, I was trying to copy my father, who always put his feet on the table. This is what triggered them to pull out the camera, and I'm glad they did. Ironically, this caused me to reflect further on this behavior and that of my father's. The action of putting your feet on a table to stretch is rarely seen nor acceptable in my native country or in the Middle East in general, mainly because we didn't really use tables unless there's some type of formal event. Mostly we sat on the floor. So I assume my father learned this behavior after migrating to the United States. And even then, it wasn't something taught, it was from television, something simple, something subtle like a movie or a TV show. And as simple as that, a bad habit is passed down from one generation to the next. A simple action, from the acts being acted upon TV, to the viewers watching them, another choice they chose to act upon, to the kid who copied those actions and maybe even passed it down to the next generation in a never-ending cycle. Inshallah, we can already begin to see how important it is to reflect on our actions both before and after they are acted upon, if we have any hopes of becoming better Muslims. And as quoted from a notable Muslim scholar, action is the fruit of knowledge, and knowledge without any action is like a tree without any fruits. Is there anything in this world that can be done without knowledge? From the simplest tasks to rocket science, there is knowledge that is required to carry them out. Without having seen it somewhere, reading about it, being instructed, researching, or even attempting and failing it until you get it right, which is knowledge by experience, what can you do other than breathe? Even that, in my personal opinion, we learn at such an early age, we have taken it for granted. There are several things that we have forgotten how to do properly, other things we just do because everyone else is doing them, and things we avoid doing because they're harmful in nature or what have been deemed as bad things to do. And better yet, there are things that we do without knowing we're doing them that can be helpful or harmful. My point being, with regards to Islam, I think most have taken this religion for granted and don't realize what they could be doing or what they're not doing that they're supposed to be doing, and all of that which is actually away from the practice of Islam. If we take breathing as a metaphor for an example, babies up until the age of 6 months or so usually breathe with their diaphragm. It's called diaphragmatic breathing. Of course, in gym class or physical education, where students are instructed to play games which heighten their senses and raise their anxiety level, ensure that most teens learn to breathe with their upper chest and continue to do so into adulthood. This latter form of breathing actually causes disruption and imbalance in the internal organ placement, displacement of gases, and raises the blood pressure, anxiety, etc. Most adults cannot naturally breathe with their diaphragm, and if you're trying to test this theory out while listening, I'm sure that you're having trouble. And just to be clear, I'm not talking about taking deep breaths like the doctor asks you to do when listening with a stethoscope. What I'm talking about is pulling air deep into your lower lungs. If you're doing so the right way, your belly should raise instead of your chest. While standing, if you do this, you should feel your lower abs start to burn. You'll quickly notice that you can't breathe like this automatically. If you try to do so without thinking about it, like when you were a baby, you would stop even after one breath. You would go back to the default way of breathing with your chest. And I said default way because this is a new state. It's not our natural state. This is not unlike what we have made out of Islam in our current state. And I do not say our current age because time has nothing to do with it. Just as there was fasad then, there is fasad now. Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, "Kullu insanin tawlidahu ummuhu ala fitrati." Everyone is born by their mothers. They're born in their true nature, which is Islam, the right way of doing things. Not just in Islam, the religion, but of their true nature, is of His way, basically, of His guidance. I wish that I could say we learned to deviate from this state long after we were born, but unfortunately, it's more like immediately after we were born. And when we've tried everything, attempted and failed, fallen victim to some illness, lost all hope of attaining what we want, we enter a psychological state ironically named learned helplessness. If you find yourself feeling like, why does this keep happening to me? What am I doing wrong? Everything I do is failing. Welcome to the club. You're already a member. You've been grandfathered in. Learned helplessness occurs when an individual continually faces a negative, uncontrollable situation and stops trying to change their circumstances, even when they have the ability to do so. For example, a smoker may repeatedly try and fail to quit. He may grow frustrated and come to some belief that nothing he can do will help, and therefore he stops trying altogether. This then turns from trying to quit to trying to hide it, maybe even feeling ashamed of it, and eventually just not caring what anyone thinks about his habit. The perception that no one can control the situation essentially elicits a passive response to the harm that it's causing. You see, Allah said in the Quran, nothing of misfortune befalls the believer except by what his own hands put forth. It doesn't just mean that something bad that you did, like a sin, but rather something that you did without knowing, or something that you thought was good but wasn't really of your own nature. How's that diaphragmatic breathing going? Unbelievable the amount of effort we have to put just to breathe properly, isn't it? Yet most are under the impression about the practice of Islam. Subhanallah. Do you know what you're doing? Do you know how what you're doing will affect others? Do you know what you're supposed to be doing but don't do? Do you know what you're doing incorrectly? I can ask millions of questions like this because knowledge is endless, and the knowledge we have chose to focus on, through no fault other than our own neglect, is worthless. And I'm sure most of you know exactly what I mean. For those that don't, how many songs have you memorized compared to chapters of the Quran? How many presidents or celebrities do you know? Detailed things about their life versus the Sahaba and the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. How many jobs have you learned compared to doing your daily prayers correctly? We all know that we're not supposed to lie, steal, commit adultery. If you steal, you go to jail. If you lie, you become untrustworthy. Your character is attacked. But there are other things that we must do instead of avoid to protect ourselves as Muslims. Alhamdulillah, Rabbana ahyana ba'di ma amwatana. When there's Asr and Fajr prayer, make dua, make tasbih, subhanallah wa bihamdihi. Subhanallah wa bihamdihi 100 times a day, 25 times after each prayer, subhanallah wa bihamdihi, and you will be guaranteed a seat in heaven. I find some people saying, tell me something I don't know, right? So let's get a little personal. Don't make du'as or avoid making prayers during sunrise or midday or sunset. I didn't say Maghrib because Maghrib is before sunset, Fajr is before sunrise. These are the times when people do evil things, rituals and whatnot that are attributed to other gods. Before intercourse with your spouse, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Allahumma jannib ash-shaytan wa jannib ash-shaytan ma razaqtana. Didn't know that, huh? Before entering the bathroom, Allahumma inni a'udhu billahi min al-khubthi wal-khaba'ith. After leaving, ghufranaka. Never say Allah's name in the bathroom. I'm sure most of you don't think about what direction the toilet is facing when you purchase your new house, but never urinate during a time where you are facing the Qibla, either east or west. Don't urinate in your shower. Don't say anything about anyone unless they're present. This is called backbiting. We all know these things, I assume. Women, please stop switching your hips when you walk by us, brothers. Yes, it looks good. It's very attractive, but it causes some harm. Don't deceive people. Every day children are being deceived. Don't tell them that you don't have money to buy something when you're in the store and they want it. Just tell them that they can't have it. Surah 25:63. Speak with words of peace even to the ignorant. Return a greeting in a better manner. When someone says, Assalamu alaikum ya ghali, Wa alaykum as-salam, nawarta ya habib. These are all adab of Islam and rules that we have been prescribed to follow in order to be good Muslims. All of these examples are from Hadith or Quran, and I may recommend to you a book. It comes in a pocket size to help you with everyday situations, called The Fortress of Islam, or The Fortress of Muslim Invocations from the Quran and Sunnah. These invocations written in this book are for any given situation you may find yourself in. May Allah bless those who have compiled it and made it easier for us. Muslims from all across the globe have misinterpreted the peacefulness and tranquility of this religion, the rahmah of al-Rahman al-Rahim, and replaced it with passiveness. Believe me when I say this, Allah will not be forgiving to laziness and neglect, because He and His Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam have given us clear instruction as to what to do in every situation of your life. So if you don't even conduct your prayers in a proper manner, how can you expect Allah to have mercy on you, let alone anything else? For the millions that think this question doesn't apply to them, allow me to humble you with a simple few words that I myself had to listen to. An Abu Ma'mar, I asked one of the Sahaba whether Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam used to recite the Quran during Dhuhr and Asr prayers. As we all know, Dhuhr and Asr prayers are done silently, correct? And the hadith continues, he replied, yes. Then we asked, how did you know that? He said, from the movement of his beard. I'm going to go through this one more time so that it sinks in. One of the Sahaba asked another Sahaba whether Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam used to recite Quran during Dhuhr and Asr, most often do in silence. And we have mistaken that silence to mean without recitation. And the Sahabi replied, yes. And then he asked again, how do you know that? He didn't just accept it. He said, how do you know that? He said, from the movement of his beard. Out of the bodies that fill the masjid during these two prayers, I maybe find 2 or 3 that actually whisper the Quran while they're praying. And I highly doubt that Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam was just moving his lips without actually speaking the words of the Quran in a low whisper. I know this can be a crushing realization for most. Inshallah, Allah will look past our flaws. I suggest that you make tawbah. Because what I'm saying is something that actually is preventing you from conducting your prayers properly. And on the day of Qiyamah, Allah will not accept the answer that I saw my fathers doing like this, or this is what they taught me in Sunday school, because it was written. Because it was written. I would also like to point out 2 things that most people are overlooking on a daily basis with regards to their actions. If you remember what we said, actions are things that you do as well as don't do. If you noticed in the hadith, even after the Sahabi replied yes, the guy asked, well, how did you know? I'm not going to take your word for it. I need proof, right? And that shows how serious they took their religion. It was their primary concern. They were worried about performing their prayers wrong and not having it accepted by Allah. These days we don't question anything. At least not aloud. Meaning we don't ask the question, we just think about it. We don't research for evidence. We don't seek out knowledge required to do things the right way. And I stress this point because these things that we think over in our heads without acting upon them, the thing that we call talking to yourself, is not what you think it is. It's a normal thing to do. It occurs every day. It's part of our nature, contrary to the belief that if you do something like this, you're crazy or it's not normal. I assure you, it's normal. Given a scenario, for example, a wife calls her husband, honey, can you please grab some milk on your way home? The good husband that he is, he doesn't question that request. He stops by the local grocery only to find that there's no milk on the shelf. A little voice in his head says, this is unacceptable. Ask them if they have any in the back. The store clerk, who's on his phone, says no. A little voice in that man's head says, he didn't even check. As if he's the first person to come into that store and ask about the milk not being on the shelf. The man leaves the store enraged. He goes home, and a little voice in it says, check the fridge to see how much milk is left. He finds a half gallon, and that same little voice doesn't need to say anything else. The man becomes enraged. His wife walks in the room. Why did you say there isn't any milk? Now his wife is looking at him as if he's crazy. She calls her mother, her neighbors, her friends. The man doesn't even want to take care of his own children. The good husband has become a tyrant because of the actions that he took and the actions that he didn't take. Why didn't you ask? How much milk is left from the beginning? Why didn't you call when you were at the store and there was no milk at on the shelf and tell your wife what's going on? 2 opportunities for rahmah that he neglected to act upon. Because he was so upset at the innocent store clerk on his phone and didn't use his wisdom to think maybe somebody else came and asked about this. Or maybe he already checked a few minutes ago. No, he just went with what he saw, right? Just like the Duhur and Asr prayers. Now, for those of you clever enough, who was the little voice in the man's head during this story? I'm sure many of you come up with the answer of Shaytan. Is it not? If you didn't know, it is the Shaytan. It's the waswasa of Shaytan. You're not talking to yourself. You're being whispered to by Shaytan. And let me ask you, when you answered that question, who's the voice in the man's head? Did you give that answer, or did Shaytan whisper that answer to you? Did you deduct it after your own reasoning, using the information that I presented to you, or did it just come out of nowhere? Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, O you who have believed. And Abdullah ibn Abbas, a man came to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Ya Rasul, I have thoughts that are of such a nature that I would rather be burnt alive than to speak them. قال النبي محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر. Subhanallah, he started by giving takbir 3 times. Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, Alhamdulillah to Allah who has reduced the plots of Shaytan to a mere whisper. Now, since we are good and faithful Muslims, let's address the doubt of these whispers. That they're not only negative in nature, but they can even be things that we call good ideas. How do we confirm this? From another hadith, of course. An Abu Hurairah, some of the Sahaba said, we find ourselves questioning, who created such and such, and who created such and such? For example, who created the earth? What about those mountains? Until Shaytan prompts us to think, who created your Lord? A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. This was the advice of the Rasul. If you analyze this, it is clear that Shaytan was attacking them in their current situation, trying to turn them against themselves, against Islam, and against the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The hadith in Arabic says, Hatta yagul, until he says. The translation, until Shaytan prompts us, is a little bit different, and that's why I urge you all to learn Arabic. But that's another lecture, inshallah. Who said this? Hatta yagul. Who said this? They knew it was Shaytan. They didn't need to mention that in the hadith. Obviously, Shaytan didn't manifest into a person. He wasn't talking to anybody because they would have mentioned this other person was present. He didn't speak to them while they were watching TV. He didn't come to them in a dream. And to bring this back to the point, he was attacking them in their current situation. And Shaytan didn't say, go kill the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam like he did to the man that stabbed Umar alayhi salam. He didn't say stop following Islam. He didn't command them to do anything. No actions. He simply asked them a question. He planted an idea in their brain. And these days, we answer those questions, don't we? It's called talking to yourself, right? We act upon those ideas. We think we're so clever. Oh my gosh, I have a great idea. Actions without knowledge, without guidance, without consideration of anything or anyone. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, O you who have believed, our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam told us, Innal a'malu bin niyat, the result of an action depends on the intentions. In my opinion, a better translation than the reward of a deed depends upon the intention. Because in the Arabic language, again, I understand this literally to mean your actions are derived from your intentions. And this makes sense, especially when you hear someone saying, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to do that. Saying something and then explaining it, that's not what I meant. Allah won't accept any of these excuses on the day when your actions will be taken into account. Now is the time to think. Talk is cheap. Take action and regain control. Say Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim and begin today by taking a deep breath. the correct way.